Okay, so tomorrow is President's Day, and so I have the day off, but really no one else that I know does, and so I decided to do a little reading vlog. So we are here to pick my first read for this vlog. I have 4 Ottesta Moshfegh books here, and yeah, we are gonna read them. Well, not all of them, I don't think. It is 5:30 or something like that on Sunday, and I do want to film a video or something tomorrow, maybe do some Spanish, so I'm starting early in order to, you know, kind of have the 24 hours, but also I am definitely sleeping. I don't miss sleep. So the books that I have are Eileen, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I'm sorry that my pillows are like this. If I was a good booktuber, I would have set up like a tripod and stuff, but Death in Her Hands, and then a short story collection called Homesick for Another World. I need to read the descriptions of these. So, Death in Her Hands. A novel of haunting metaphysical suspense about an elderly widow whose life is upturned when she finds an ominous note on a walk in the woods. A triumphant blend of horror, suspense, and pitch-black comedy. My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I've heard a lot about this one, so I'm pretty sure I know what it is about, but shockingly and strange, tender novel about a young woman's efforts to duck the world by embarking on an extended hibernation with the help of one of the worst psychiatrists in the annals of literature, and the battery of medicines she prescribes. Okay. Eileen is honestly the one that has appealed to me most, just seeing it around. A lonely young woman working in a boys' prison outside Boston in the early 60s is pulled into a very strange crime in a mordant, harrowing story of obsession and suspense. I'm thinking I might actually start with Death in Her Hands because it seems like the shortest, and honestly, I'm into that. So, I guess I didn't really introduce the premise of this book, of this video. So, I have never read anything from Ottesta Moshfegh, even though, you know, she's all over the place, and I've always been interested. My Year of Rest and Relaxation has probably been the one that interested me maybe the least, but I just kind of wanted to try her out, and this seemed like a fun way to do it, and so here we are. So I am going to get started on Death in Her Hands. Hey, baby. She was purring, and then a loud car just went by, so she stopped purring. Okay, I just recorded a whole bunch of things, except I wasn't recording. So, we are an hour and 15 minutes in. I have read about 100 pages of this book, and so far, I do not love it. I don't dislike it, but if I weren't reading for this, I probably already would have DNF'd it. I am going to try to push through and just finish it, because honestly, you know, it'll be another, like, hour or so. I will probably be skimming a little bit. It just feels so pointless. So we're following an older woman. She's like 75, I think, whose husband has died, and she has moved to a little lake cottage. She comes across this note that says that this woman was killed and that her body is there, but there's no body there. And so she becomes obsessed with this and starts trying to solve this. Except she's, like, not trying to solve it. Like, it's all in her mind. She's not actually doing anything, so far at least, and I'm almost halfway through. She's not doing anything real to solve this. She's just thinking about it and imagining what could have happened. So anyway, I don't dislike it, but it just feels very pointless, and her narrative, like, it's the, you know, you're in the perspective of this woman. And she is not super likable. Not, like, dislikable. No, maybe dislikable. But anyway, there are, like, understandable things that she talks about. Like, she talks about her husband in ways that is sometimes, you know, endearing, sometimes really disturbing, etc. But her, like, perspective on the people around her is Yikes. And yeah, so anyway, I will keep reading and I will let you know. If I don't finish this before I go to sleep, I'm not finishing it. I finished it. I have no coherent thoughts whatsoever. I have maybe never felt so meh about a book. It was okay. I don't feel like I got really anything out of it. It is telling like more of an interesting story than it seemed at the beginning, but that's not like really hard. And I feel like there are many books that tell this kind of story much better, like Mrs. Dalloway, Private Life by Jane Smiley, The Woman Destroyed by Simone de Beauvoir, all very similar like topics, and although they're not as like weird as this one, I think they do it much more successfully. Like, to me, the weirdness of this, it was not too weird for me by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just, it didn't add anything, you know, like I didn't feel like I was gaining anything from it. The whole story seemed very pointless to me, so we're not off to a, you know, amazing start. But also, to be fair, this is definitely not one of her books that I see people talking about very much, so it could just be that this is not, you know, one of her best. So this one was published in 2020. So, pretty recent, but we shall see. It's like 8:45, and I don't think I'm going to start another one tonight. I'm going to do something else before I go to sleep, and then tomorrow we will embark on a new book. Good morning. I woke up with a headache, so the first item on the agenda today is to go get some sinus medication and some coffee. I'm going to be listening to my Spanish audiobook while I do that. My kind of secondary goal for the day would be to finish this if I can, but I do have 4 hours left of it, so I don't know that that's going to happen, but we'll give it a try. Okay, so I'm like only like 20 pages into this. I keep getting distracted, but this is very funny in a very like ironic way, or I don't know how to explain it, but so we're following Eileen when she is 21 and working at a juvenile prison, boys prison, basically, in New England in the 60s, and she's about to run away from home. And so she's telling us this story like 50 years later. I think if like Salinger or someone equally like self-absorbed, like any of those books like that, A Separate Peace maybe, but anyway, any of those like male authors from that era that are writing about self-absorbed young men or boys, this is like that, but, you know, a girl and self-aware. I can see how you'd start to read this and absolutely hate it. Like, just fully, absolutely hate it. It is so self-absorbed, and she would tell you that she is so self-absorbed. I mean, she's working in a boys' prison where they're like being abused and that sort of thing, and it's the 60s, so there's obviously like major things happening in the world outside of this which haven't even been mentioned, and she's like, oh, I'm so different than everyone in this sleepy town, you know, like, I don't like the things that everyone else likes. Like, there was this passage, let me see if I can find it. I did not like to sweat in front of other people. Such proof of carnality I found lewd, disgusting. Similarly, I did not like to dance or do sports. I did not listen to the Beatles or watch Ed Sullivan on TV. I wasn't interested in fun or popularity back then. I preferred to read about ancient times, distant lands. Knowledge of anything current or faddish made me feel as I was just a victim of isolation. If I avoided all that on purpose, I could believe I was in control. Just unforgivably self-absorbed, but again, self-aware. Like, she will also say that about herself. So anyway, I'm like very interested to see how this unfolds, because again, I could see reading this and absolutely hating it, because what is the point? You know, but at the same time, I do want to see what else she has to say. So far, absolutely, by far, liking this much better than Death in Her Hands. So anyway, I need to actually like focus and read. Okay, halfway through about. I'm going to eat some lunch, and I need to do dishes, clean the kitchen, etc. So we're gonna have an interlude of not reading. I'm gonna try to listen to more of my Spanish book, which I now have 3.5 hours left of, so. Okay, ready to finish this book. I washed all of my dishes except silverware, and then I ran out of hot water, so I'll have to do that later. So I'm eating yogurt with a camping knife. And once I finish this, I think I'm going to go for a walk and finish my dishes, and then, if I have time, start my year of rest and relaxation. So, wish me luck on this ambitious plan. Okay, done with Eileen. Wow. Wow. Okay, so, as expected, liked this a lot more than Death in Her Hands. Wildly disturbing on every level. Also very slow. Nothing really happens until the last, 40 pages. But this one does have a lot more plot than Death in Her Hands. So definitely, I would say, buries the lead on not just the plot, but also, the character. Both of these characters, you kind of start out, both the main characters of both of these books, you start out seeing them very surface level, or at least I did, but there is a lot more going on, a lot of dark history, obviously if you've read it. The dark history doesn't at all, excuse the way that they are. Really, really terrible people with really, really terrible takes. The way that they see people and describe people is horrifying. The thoughts that she has, sometimes they are thoughts that I think everybody has that, you certainly wouldn't want people to know. Some of them, I at least don't have those thoughts, and I don't think that I have, better thoughts than most people. So yeah, I don't really have coherent thoughts on this yet, as you can tell from this ramble. This was an experience for sure. It really, really does remind me of older male classic authors, though, like J.D. Salinger, F. Scott Fitzgerald. It really does remind me of that, with the gross element added in, because obviously J.D. Salinger and F. Scott Fitzgerald were not writing about bodily functions and excrement and everything. That part is different, but the absolute unhingedness of it, the self-obsession of it, the solipsisticness of it, the just complete and total living inside of the mind of one character for the entire book. It really does remind me of those authors. So anyway, It is now 3:30, so I'm gonna carry on with my day. If I budget 4 hours, then I need to start by 5:30 or 6. So I think I'm gonna try to go for a walk, finish my dishes, start it, then maybe I'll have a pause for dinner and stuff. So anyway, you didn't need to know all that, but... Okay, about to start this. I'm not even gonna lie to you, I kind of expect to DNF this. I think I'm going to give it about 50 pages, and then if I'm not into it, I'm going to DNF it. I just don't know if I want to sit through another really slow build right now. But anyway, I'm going to give it a go, and we're going to see how it goes. Okay, well, we've made it. I read these 3 books. I feel like I just went through this experience. Not really, not at all, but yeah, wow. Okay, so we'll just go through my thoughts. Overall, I think an undeniably very talented writer. There are beautiful passages. She's very like absurdist, I want to say. So, you know, on the same page, you can have, you're feeling bad for the character, you know, something really horrible happens to them. You can really relate to them about something that they say. They can say something very, you know, relatable or understandable. You can be laughing and rolling your eyes at something absolutely absurd or intolerable that they say. And you can be absolutely, you know, gasping at something appalling, truly appalling, you know, racist, anti-fat, ableist, you know, all classist, all across the board that your character has said. So it's a little bit whiplash-inducing following these characters, and they are all like that. I would say that of these 3 books at least, she is very formulaic, like she follows a very predictable trajectory with her books. You are following a very unreliable, very unlikable, but kind of occasionally relatable character who you gradually come to realize has had an extremely traumatic life, but who is coping with that in a very unhealthy way and is in some kind of bizarre situation, which is very slow developing and then rapidly accelerates at the end. She is immovable in her storytelling. She will not be hurried for anyone. And so these are very slow, methodical, tells you everything that you didn't want to or didn't care to know. You know, you cannot hurry her through a story. I read these in the order that I liked them, actually. This was by far my least favorite. This was maybe the most neutral character. She is extraordinarily anti-fat, and it is not really discussed at all in here. It's just expressed. So I know that the author has discussed her own struggles with eating disorders, and that is a major theme through all of these books, but this one, it's really not discussed at all. It is pretty much just a feature of this character. So I didn't, you know, feel like it really served any purpose in this book. All in all, actually, this book just felt incredibly pointless to me. As I said, I would have DNF'd this if I weren't reading it for this vlog. I'm not upset that I read it, you know, it was a rapid experience, but I will absolutely not remember it past tomorrow, I don't think. I love the premise of telling older women's stories. I think that it's not something that is done enough, but this one just did not do it in a way that felt meaningful at all to me. I've got nothing important to say about that book for sure. Eileen, A Wild Ride. Again, brutally slow at the beginning, but I did find that my interest level was, ramped up a little bit from the first one. So ironically, this one was written the most recently. This one was written first, and this one was written in between those two. So we're not moving in a great direction apparently. But anyway, this one is the most appalling of the three, I think. I didn't get her most recent novel because that one is supposed to be extraordinarily appalling, and also it's in like the 15th century or something, and it just really didn't appeal to me. But anyway, this one definitely has the most like heavy topics, or like heavy interpersonal topics as opposed to heavy intrapersonal topics. If you are concerned about trigger warnings, this author is one that you are always going to have to look up every single book that you read for sure. Yeah, as I said, it's very strange to be reading from the perspective of someone who does have a lot of life trauma for sure, but is maybe not going through as traumatic of things as the characters that she is around, in a boys' prison where terrible things are happening. And she doesn't care about that really at all. And again, she is very aware of that as she's narrating this to you, that it's ridiculous that she was so self-absorbed and thought that her life was so terrible, when in reality she was, yes, she had a fucked up life, but like she was turning a blind eye to all of these things that were happening. And she even says in here that she considered herself to be like one of the boys in the prison. And in a way she was, in that, she's a cog in the machine, but like in a much bigger and more important way she was not. She was someone who, was helping run that machine. So I don't know. I get what she's doing, I think, with these, but I feel neutral, I guess, on the way that she has chosen to do this. Liked this one. Also could see why people would hate it and just hate her as an author, but for me it was very interesting as a character study, as an analysis of, fucked up people, as is clearly what she is exclusively interested in doing as an author. And then actually, very surprisingly to me, this one was my favorite. I really did not think I was going to like this book, but actually did. Again, the same story of you're following someone who has a very clearly fucked up life, but you kind of continue to uncover more about that as the book progresses. On the surface, she's exclusively and extremely privileged, and she is undeniably an extremely privileged person, and she says that herself, but she just can't cope with life and decides to go into, as much medically induced sleep as possible through the course of a year to try to be like reborn. And that sounds like something that would be incredibly boring to read about, but this was by far the most engaging narrator to me. She is in some ways the most unlikable of these narrators, but she is by far the most charismatic, at least to me. She is cold and deeply uncaring in most ways, but she also is a much more interesting narrator to read from than, say, the narrator of Eileen, who technically I think was more quote-unquote relatable from like a personal standpoint, but she was not that entertaining to read from, and she was much more entertaining to read from. And also, I think anyone who has been through a depressive episode could read this and relate to a lot of it. Obviously, most of us are not in a position where we can do anything like this, or even, not show up to work, but the desire is there, and the inability sometimes to do any of the things that you're supposed to do, and just the ability to just exist, you know, in filth sometimes. The feeling like if you could just check out for a while, that you could be better, you know? So, my final verdict, obviously my brain is a little bit fried from reading 700 pages, 800 pages of this author in like a 36-hour period. But my preliminary conclusion would be that I'm not opposed to reading something from her in the future, but I'm also not like, oh, this is one of my favorite new authors. I do think I have to see how the books kind of settle. You know, sometimes I read something and I'm like, okay, and then it just sticks with me. And I could see that happening with this book in particular, that it would really, I would continue thinking about it often, but I could also see that happening with absolutely none of these. So, not a new fave, but also really such an interesting experience to read these. And I would say she is an author that it would be very safe to read one and form an opinion, not gonna lie. I don't think I needed to read all 3 of these. I'm glad I kept reading after the first one since I did not like it at all, but she is, as I said, very formulaic. All of them are very, very similar and deal with similar themes. And again, I've only read 3 of her books. She does have, I believe, 2 other novels and this short story collection. So I haven't read all of her work, but based on reading 3, I think you could read My Year of Rest and Relaxation and have a very good feel for her work. And I would say the last thing, so I've never been quite sure how I feel about authors including really, really problematic things when they don't comment on it at all. And this is something that I have about a lot of authors, and I think it's hard to discuss or hard to analyze what effect it's having. So like Fernanda Melchor with her books set in Mexico, Paradise and Hurricane Season. I haven't read Hurricane Season yet, but you know, they're obviously very, very horrifically violent and disturbing, and they're intended to be, and there's no way, I don't think, that you could read them and not immediately see how awful everything in them is, you know? These, you should be able to immediately see how awful these characters are, but I could see some people maybe not. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit stickier, because all of these narrators are, again, like I said, racist, anti-fat, anti-LGBTQ+, just on and on, like very, very classist, very all kinds of different things. Obviously, you're not supposed to be thinking that that's good, but also I just don't know how I feel about presenting that kind of thing without ever talking about it in a meaningful way. And I don't think that that was unintentional. Like, I think she is viewing this as her talking about it. I'm just not sure that readers will always see it as her talking about it, but I also don't know how much of that is on her, you know? Anyway, I do not have coherent thoughts right now, but if you have thoughts on that topic, let me know in the comments. So, yes, this was quite an experience. I am glad that I did this. This was a very weird way to do it, and not something that I would necessarily recommend, but we did it. We survived. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.